Thank you, Joey. Thanks to UNCDF for organizing this event and inviting me to speak in the event. And it's a pleasure to have Khadija with me for this session for the next 20-25 minutes. And good afternoon, Khadija. I would like to start off with the first question to you. And the question is about the agriculture landscape in Malaysia, just to set the context for all the participants and delegates in the call. What exactly does the agriculture landscape look like, and what's the role of smallholder farmers in Malaysian agriculture?
Okay, thank you, Arindom, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to UNCDF also for inviting me. Okay, let me start by maybe giving some historical background about the landscape in Malaysia. Way back in 1957, the GDP contribution of agriculture to our GDP in Malaysia, which is way back in 1957, is actually about 46%. And back then, about 80.3% of the working population was actually in agriculture sector. This was way back in 1957. And today we can see in 2020, that contribution to GDP is 7.4%. And in terms of the number of people employed in the industry, it's about 1.87 million, which is about 12% of their working population. So, you know, this is actually a result of the transformation to industrial revolution. But this is not just unique to Malaysia. I've done some research and I've seen the same trend actually even in India or in Indonesia. So today, if you see what is the GDP contribution of the agriculture to the current economy in Malaysia, when we look at the agro-based and commodities, it used to be, I think last year it was supposed to, the breakdown was like 50-50%. But in 2020, the breakdown for agro-food and commodities actually has changed a little bit. For agro-food, it's in 2020 it was 52%, and for commodities it was 48%. So there's a change there. And if we break that down further, for agro-food, you see for crops, the GDP contribution, the CAGR from 2011 to 2019 is about 7.9%, and for livestock is 9.4%. And for fisheries is 3.6%. So all in all, if you look at the total contribution, if we just look based on agro-food and agro-commodities, we can see that 6.8% is actually represented. The growth is the share of the GDP is from agro-food, and for commodities is actually contracted by 1.8%. But we're not saying that it's not important. Because commodities remain one of the major income contributor to Malaysia. Yeah, so it remains important. However, we need to diversify in terms of land use, and also we have to mitigate the risk of overdependence on oil palm. So that is the landscape for agriculture industry in Malaysia in terms of the contribution to the economy. So of course, just like in any parts of the world, that we expect that demand for food will continue to rise, and because of the growing population, and also majority of the, I would say, participants in the industries are actually from the small farmers, yeah, the smallholders. So those are basically the highlights of the landscape of agriculture here in Malaysia today.
Thanks, Khadija. And as you rightly mentioned, we see similar trends across Asia of agriculture contribution being decreasing over a period of time due to higher contribution by the service and by the manufacturing sector. Now, the second question I would like to ask you is, as a very senior banker, agriculture banker in Malaysia, what are the institutional and non-institutional sources of finance for the agriculture sector, especially the upstream players, whether they are farmers or farmer organizations?
In Malaysia, actually, just to share a little bit of the background of Agrobank. Agrobank was established in 1967, slightly more than 50 years ago. So it was established specifically for the purpose of financing back then the irrigation project in the north of Malaysia. This is to support the local production for rice sufficiency. So Agrobank was established purely to look at the needs of the agriculture community and also initiatives. So when we look at the financial industry activities in Malaysia, we coexist with commercial banks, of course. Agrobank is a DFI. But DFI plays a counter-cyclical roles compared to the commercial banks, which is a pro-cyclical. So commercial banks generally, they will only have a portfolio that are less risky compared to agriculture. The tendency or inclination is to do retail-based financing, maybe home financing, motor vehicle financing, or even personal financing. And although they do SMEs, but the risk appetite for agriculture sector is limited. So this is where the role of DFI like Agrobank comes in. So for Agrobank, and okay, before I talk more about Agrobank, there are also agencies, government agencies that provide grants and financing to the sector. But for Agrobank, among the mandates, we have a few mandates. So I would just like to highlight a few of them. It's the material one, where one of the mandates is actually the main one is to promote the agriculture practices and development in Malaysia. And of course, as we are owned by the Ministry of Finance, and our role is also to channel the funds and supervise the grant financing to the community, to the agriculture community specifically, and also uplift well-being of the agriculture community and carry on general businesses. Yeah, so these general businesses that can help the community. So if you see our vision, last year actually, we had our vision where we say advancing agriculture beyond banking. So although we do have products just like any other banks, and our roles in addition to the traditional roles being a bank, then we do have this mandate to help the agriculture sector, which is, we say, advancing it beyond just banking. So that's basically what is the financial landscape in Malaysia.
Thank you, Khadijah. And again, we see similar trends across Asia where the mainstream commercial banks, the retail banks, they don't have much appetite to lend to agriculture sector. Yeah. And it's the specialized DFIs or large agriculture banks supported by the government and the Ministry of Agriculture and other departments which are pushing agriculture development in the country. Thanks for that. And Khadijah, could you also give us a sense in Malaysia of the different supply chains which are there, which are important for Malaysia's economy and for the farmers? What kind of issues and pain points are there? Can you just identify a few of them, specifically from a smallholder farmer perspective, please?
Okay, I think it's interesting. The challenges, the normal three challenges that we would see, just like in any other countries in terms of productivity, then the efficiency of the supply chain, then of course lately is about the climate risk, right? Climate change. And then, however, the issues actually more apparent because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So if we can learn from that situation where in Malaysia, the lockdowns started since March, and since then we have various flexibility depending on how the pandemic progresses. But we can see that since in March 2020, that there's a drop in the economic performance by 17%. This was in Q2 in 2020, and all the sectors also have recorded contraction. But for agriculture, I think this when the rest actually drops in general, in the economic performance, but agriculture recorded an improvement. That is because of the importance of the food supply. Yeah, and when we talk about this COVID-19 pandemic, then we see the impact on the social, on the smallholders and the small farmers, where there's a brief interruption of the supply chain, but it has been resolved. And what happened then? During that time, there's a demand and there's of course supply, but then the chain in between had been interrupted. And what we can see also during that time, that consumers or even these farmers, they have to accelerate the adoption to the online trading or the e-commerce, yeah, because they have no choice, but they need to survive. So they adapt very quickly. And of course, during that time, banks like DFIs like us, Agrobank, has to come in and continue to provide the funding. So basically, what happened, the challenges, if I can summarize, is more on their productivity and the supply chain, and as well as I think the emerging risk is more of the climate risk. Yeah, those are what are the problems that are faced by these farmers. If I can actually draw your attention also to, if I can give one example, for instance, paddy. Paddy is actually a strategic commodity for Malaysia. So, and then there's an issue of when we talk about SSL. So paddy, the SSL for paddy in Malaysia is relatively low, it's still below 70%. So this is one of the focus area for the country, actually, how to improve that further. So as I mentioned earlier, in 1967, there was an initiative by the government to embark on a irrigation project so that this area, the granular areas, can be expanded. So again, is to resolve the issue of production. So then when we want to address, when the country wanted to address the issue of production, they tried to find a bigger area. And therefore, the crop plantations also, the planting of the crops actually have improved to 2 times a year from one time, from used to be just 1 time in a year. So there is efforts that have been made to improve productivity as well as yield and output. However, more needs to be done, not just for paddy. Paddy is one of the important one, but we need to do more, and therefore we need to look into technology, how we can improve further. So when we talk about technology, how technology can address all these 3 main problems that are faced by the farmers, yeah, regardless of the size actually, but those that will be those who will be most affected will be the smaller ones, yeah. So those actually in terms of and as well as I think there's another is also in terms when we talk about supply chain, about the market, about the offtake. How do we play our role? Yeah, how can we help the farmers as well? So those are basically the challenges that are faced by the small players. Yeah.
Thank you, Khadijah. And the last question that I have for you, drawing from the conversation we have had so far, is you mentioned about e-commerce, you mentioned about technology, you mentioned about how farmers are adopting to e-commerce, which they had not done earlier. Now, what is the role that technology can play to make the farmers better farmers, or to have the farmers reach out to other business players, or to access better financial services, whether it's banking services, insurance services, from FX institutions like yours, or from commercial banks, or for fintech companies? So what do you feel can be the role of technology, and how easily can technology be deployed and accepted by all the stakeholders, including the farmers? That's the critical question, and I guess it's very important for UNCDF and all the participants to know that, because we are looking at infusion of more technology into the Malaysian agriculture sector.
Okay. I think first of all, we have to look from Malaysian perspective. There are opportunities actually in Malaysia for the Agritech, and also the importance of it has been recognized. Even if I can quote the recent budget for 2021, that there's also announcement made by the government where there are allocation to promote fintech, modernization, so can improve productivity. And in addition to the allocation for the technology itself, there's also allocation for National Digital Network Initiative to improve the cellular, the outreach to the farmers, because most of the farmers are normally in the rural area, right? So that's actually opportunities where the country is trying to promote adoption of technology. And again, if we look at the industry, even here in Malaysia, the average age of the farmers is about 60 years old. So it's understandable that the adoption to technology may not be as easy as the younger generation. And yet there's an issue where the younger generation may not want to continue what the parents have been doing, or may not be interested in farming. So one way of addressing this could be is by the introduction of technology, how to make this industry sexy or more attractive to the young ones. And then if by using the technology, it can actually improve the yield of productivity and therefore increase the income generation, that would be very attractive to the young generation, especially during this COVID pandemic, where we can see quite a few who have lost their employment, their jobs. So this is another opportunity for them to go into. However, the industry itself needs to be modernized so that it's attractive to all ages. And then that is more from the perspective of the farmers. But the banks itself have plays a role also. So in order to protect the farmers, that in Malaysia, we still have not had this crop insurance, or we call it crop takaful in Islamic finance. One of the reasons may be because lack of data. So by adoption of technology or by having a fintech, maybe we can have some kind of analytical ability, and then to have some database where it can help all the stakeholders, not just the banks, but also the government, to help the farmers. And for all you know, it may also help the farmers. The data can help the farmers also in terms of marketing their products, and who they can work with. So that is one. And for us, the banks, if you have the data, then it can facilitate what kind of coverage that we can develop. So it's already announced by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Industry that Agrobank is to lead the development of this crop takaful. So so this technology will really help. And in addition to this protection for the banks also, we need to continue to provide support to these farmers. And because majority of these farmers, if we're talking about the small farmers, the small size farmers, so we need to improve our process as well in the bank. So if we have the data, we can actually become more efficient and simplify the way we process the financing, rather than by using the traditional method, by asking for accounts and all those, where, because most of these are small farmers, the financial discipline may not be as like any other large companies. So with the data that we have, we change the way we do things, the new norm in financing as well. So those are actually from the bank's perspective. So there's a lot of opportunities because the bank is looking at improving the SSL. We're looking at the industry. Then I've spoken about paddy industry just now, where the SSL level is still low and meat is still low, beef at 22.3% only, and mutton at 11.8%. So if you can have some technology in that industry to improve the productivity, production, the output, and liquid milk, 63% SSL only, and rice I mentioned about 63%, and even fruits about 78.2%, and the fish about 93%. So those who have achieved the SSL of more than 100%, then technology may be able to help them to enhance their market. They may want to export those that it's more than 100%. So to me, if in our view, if this challenge can help solve some of the problems faced by the industry, for instance, the manpower management, how can technology help the industry in managing the manpower? However, we must not also forget, because we're talking about the small farmers. When we talk about technology, it must be affordable to them. And at the end of the day, it must be able to save costs for them. And therefore they can be more efficient and they can get more income. So, and in terms of, I mentioned about data just now, that we need to get, must be able to have this data storage and analytics, yeah, for the Agritech. And of course, we're talking about the need for the optimization of precision engineering, because to maintain the quality of the produce as well, yeah, and then to reduce wastages, and this can also help to mitigate some of the climate risks, yeah, faced by these farmers. So those are basically the opportunities, I would say, in the technology, not necessarily just for the banks when we talk about fintech, yeah? What is the technology adoption even for the farmers? And we must be mindful that these farmers are not really very sophisticated group of people in terms of adoption of technology. Those are actually the challenges and the opportunities in Malaysia.
Thanks, Khadijah. Thanks for the wonderful overview you gave of the agri and the financing landscape in Malaysia, and also the possible role that technology can play in transforming the sector to become more efficient, so that the farmers have access to better services and products and can reach out to better markets. And also from your perspective is to help the farmers address the issue of the climate risk, one. And second, it's extremely important, you mentioned that you're working on crop insurance product for which technology is required. Thank you so much, Khadijah. And with this, I would like to hand over to the UNCDF team of Joey and Priyank for any questions and answers, any questions which the other delegates and participants may wish to ask.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you both for the interesting discussion. I am sure that our participants have learned a lot about the agriculture sector in Malaysia now. And indeed, there have been a few questions that were raised, which I would like to pose to Puan Khadijah. So the first one is, this is asked by Gaurav Pundir. He asks, what has been the experience in Malaysia with respect to the uptake of crop loans by smallholders when bundled with insurance, if that is something that you have done, particularly index insurance-based products, again, if that is something relevant to Agrobank?
Yeah, actually, in Malaysia, we have yet to have any type of crop insurance or crop takaful. So we are developing it and we are exploring with several parties and what are the most suitable type of coverage for the farmers in Malaysia. And of course, one of them, we are looking at this various types of coverage, yeah. And one of them could be linked to the weather, maybe, yeah. But again, it has not been finalized yet in Malaysia. We are working on it now.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps an opportunity there.
Yes.
Also, how is e-commerce currently helping smallholder farmers? Do you see that they are leveraging a lot of e-commerce, or is it still mostly agent-based?
Yes, we can see the trend where the small farmers actually get into the e-commerce platform. And in fact, because of COVID-19, there's even a new e-commerce platform has been established, and the farmers are actually adapting well to it. And of course, we need some time for it to be optimized. But I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the e-commerce platform that we have in Malaysia. One of them, if I can mention the name, is Shopee. Shopee, if you know Shopee before this, they do not sell any fresh goods. But now you can click on Shopee and you can see all the farmers actually get onto that platform. So everyone is learning. So I think that the learning has been accelerated because of COVID, for something positive out of the pandemic actually for the industry.
Yes, certainly. Thank you so much. Perhaps another question is, what are the biggest challenges that you as a CEO of the bank face in serving this segment of smallholder farmers?
Okay. For this, people, when we manage a bank, people always people only know about money to be given out by the bank. That's only actually 50% of the role of the bank. We forgot about the fiduciary duty of the bank, that they have to take care of the depositors' money. So that is also equally important. So that's actually the biggest challenge, making people understand we have to balance between the good credit, notwithstanding that we are DFIs and our mandated roles. However, we always have our in the bank, we have our own benchmark and measurement. We always remind ourselves we are not a commercial bank, so we must be playing a different role. The moment, for instance, our impact rate is better than commercial banks, then we're not doing our role. So that is one indicator. So even though asset quality is a very important indicator, but for DFI, whose role is actually more on the counter-cyclical, then we really need to make sure that we did deliver what we need to deliver. So we monitor closely our mandated roles. So our risk appetite is very different from commercial banks. We need to differentiate ourselves from commercial banks. And for the smaller customers, of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's opportunity there. If we can adopt some technology to simplify the process, and therefore we can reduce the turnaround time. Then one of the challenges for Agrobank, if you look at our financial accounts, we have always been criticized for having the high cost. However, it has been working in our favor in delivering our mandates, because majority of our channels are actually in the rural areas. So that's to us, that is cost of doing business, because the moment we try, because when we have these small size customers, the services are beyond just giving out money. We need to guide them. We have to hold their hands, and before even they become our customers. So that's actually part of our roles, not simply giving out money and then collecting them. No, it's beyond that. That's why our vision now is advancing agriculture beyond banking, not just doing the traditional financing.
Yes, thank you. And perhaps if you don't mind, I will ask one final question, which is, I think that you mentioned earlier a little bit about paddy crops. So one of the questions in the chat is that smallholder farmers, are they taking only paddy crops, or are they also doing allied agricultural activities like aquaculture, cattle, honeybees, these types of things?
Yeah, our mandate, actually, we're looking at all type of crops as well as all other agriculture sectors. But doing, as I mentioned earlier, because paddy is the strategic commodity for the country, then we will start looking at the paddy first, and then the rest actually will be covered gradually, eventually, yes.
Thank you so much. For those of you whose questions I have not been able to answer, I will take note of them and see whether we can try to get some responses on those points at a later point. But for now, I think we have to move on with the program. So I would like to thank so much both of you, Puan Khadijah Iskandar, as well as Mr. Arindom Datta, for joining us this morning and helping to facilitate this conversation about the agriculture sector in Malaysia and the opportunities, of course, for Agritech solutions as well.